What is up, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts Guys. Today I'm doing a little discussion video talking about the new format because for the first time in a while it feels like really different. I mean, the last ban list we did see like finally Emancipator get hit and some other things, but overall, other than Emancipator, the format didn't change a ton. I guess Eldritch got a decent bit worse or kind of wiggled out of the meta, but other than that, the format was still pretty similar moving forward, and I'm happy where the format is. I don't know, it's weird to say because it feels like no matter what format we're ever in, all you ever hear is complaining. Nobody's ever like, I love this format's amazing. All you ever hear is, this is what's wrong with the format, this is what needs to go next ban list. And you always hear it like 2 weeks after the last ban list. And I'm like, give it some time. Oh my. This is one of my favorite formats we've ever been in. I really enjoyed the, what was it, like Orcust, Thunder Dragon, Sky Striker, Salamangreat formats we had, because it was a lot of control decks. You guys know I enjoy control matchups. I think that's just so fun of like battling back and forth with advantage and trying to take control of the game that way. That's my favorite way to duel. And so this format kind of reminds me of that. It's finally as slow as those formats felt for the first time in a while. Now Yu-Gi-Oh! Is still super fast. Even some of these control decks are like, control the board for a turn, don't let you take back control, and then they just like still can sometimes just kill you on the next turn. But that's just Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2020. But today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, and I guess the first place to start is like where the top decks are, what's good and what's not. Obviously we know Infernoble seems like it's really dropped off the map. I still think they're like fine. I don't think they're like maybe they're dead competitively, but I still think they're like, they could be a decent rogue like combo deck that's good at playing through disruptions. They still have Hulk and Isolde, so like Isolde baits a negate, then you transition into Hulk with extenders and still be able to like get to disruptions like through hand traps and stuff. Which is fine, and also Dragon Link. I'm not sure. I still think Dragon Link is like, could potentially be a tier 1 deck. I just think a lot of the players that were on Dragon Link said, okay, the ban list is out, okay, we also get some new stuff from Genesis Impact, let's move to something new, something interesting. I want to try this. I'm bored with Dragon Link because Dragon Link's been around for so long. So I still think Dragon Link could make its way back into tier 1 eventually when the format kind of settles down and people are just discovering maybe Drytron's really good or maybe it's not, and some of those combo players that don't want to play Virtual World because it's a little bricky move back to something like Dragon Link. I think that's totally possible. So those are the only decks that really left the meta due to their own hits. Other than that, what was already in the meta? You could argue Virtual World, even though it had only been out for just a little bit, from Phantom Rage, still kind of was in tier 1, and I think it definitely still fits that bill today. It's a really strong deck. I think this card, Chuche, that I have on the screen, I think this card is like the biggest culprit as to why this deck is still so good. And I don't want to say culprit like it's a bad thing. I actually really like this card. I think if you took VFD out of the deck would actually be really cool. You'd have a ton of extenders, but you don't have that like degenerate end board card, which I think is cool. But you'd still have this card, which is like such an insane card. It allows this deck to beat a lot of control matchups, which combo decks can sometimes struggle with, but this card's insane. But I still think they sit in a really nice spot. We'll see. I kind of want VFD just to get banned, just so that I just want to see how this deck plays, because I think it becomes like a really cool, like, I don't want to say mid-range because it's still a combo deck, but it like combos into a control situation. It kind of reminds me of like Ritual Beast in that sense. Like, you're not comboing to go into an end board with like 8 negates and just like destroy your opponent. You're comboing into like one really strong disruption, and you also have Chuche with an additional like protection and pop, a way to work around certain things, and with like 2-3 cards in hand and a ton of follow-up for the following turn. Like, that's what the deck does, that's what it excels at, and it's very good at doing so. So yeah, Virtual World still sits in tier 1. It's probably the #1 contender at this point, but we'll see. Next up is Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, nothing changed for them, like, at all. and a lot of people thought, including myself, that Misk should go back to 1. This deck's just been like hovering on tier 1 for so long now, and a lot of people, like, the problem is just people don't enjoy playing against it. It's decently fun to play, I get that. I actually have played it before, and it's pretty fun to play. But like Misk is like so degenerate, like your dinosaur stuff is just untouchable. So like hand traps just don't matter outside of Lancia. Like there's so many things that just like don't matter to this deck at all, and they just play straight through your interruptions, which is just tough. I mean, like, we know why that's busted in Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, you got to be able to stop them somehow. You have to have some kind of counter, more than just Lancia as the only card. So I get it, but they still sit here. I think, again, this is one of those instances of, because dinos have been around for so long, some of those players that have been playing dinos for a while now saw, okay, the format really took a big shift. We got a couple new interesting decks. I'm going to try those out in the new format and see where it goes. But I could see, when the format settles down again, kind of same thing as Dragon Link, people moving back to dinos because they're like, you know what, dinos were good to me. I was doing really well with dinos. The new deck hasn't really done me as well. And then we could see dinos get a little more regular with the way that they're performing at events and stuff. So I think they're still in a pretty good spot. Obviously, they're just so powerful, right? And then we get to something super interesting, which is the new deck Drytron. This one's an interesting one for sure. So I did a video with Charles from Team COG when this archetype got revealed, and we pretty much just like went through the entire archetype and talked about like every card, and pretty much went through it, and we were literally just like, wow, this deck has 10 what seems to be good cards. Like, I don't think a single one of these cards is not good. You don't play all of them in the deck because you have to make room for like fairies and other packages as well for like the ritual stuff, but the engine is strong and consistent and generic, searching like any ritual cards in the game, and that definitely opens up the avenue for a lot of different things here. So I think the deck's good. I think it'll only get better when we finally get that the Herald girl, the little normal summon girl that's like, she normal summons herself to like dump a Herald of the Arclight to get a search. Then she like can change her level to level 6. I think she might do something else too, but those are the two main level things. Is she like raises her level, which is pretty good for like Herald stuff, and then also like gets you at least one search, which is kind of crazy. So that's very strong, obviously. But the deck's good. It's a crazy combo deck. You're ending on weird stuff like Vanity's Ruler and like Herald. Some of them decks play Herald. There's weird different versions we've seen splashing around with this. This deck seems strong out the gate. It may just be, but there's also always this combination with new decks of sometimes a deck overperforms because nobody knows how to play against it yet. So once everybody knows what to side deck, what they want to main deck for the format, that gives them an advantage versus the deck. Obviously, you could see the deck come back down a little bit from that, but also you could argue that like it's early for the deck, so people haven't found out the most optimal builds. So once people get a little more closer and closer to optimal builds, the deck will be more consistently performing at its peak and raise it up. So there's always like a balance there. Sometimes one of those things outweighs the other, and the deck can land in a different spot than it originally seemed it would at the beginning of the format. So I still think it's really strong. Right now it seems like a tier 1 contender, arguably. We'll see where it goes. It's kind of like the combo deck of the format. I mean, you could argue Virtual World is that, but Virtual World is like I said at the beginning, is like, it's a weird deck where it's like kind of combo-y, but you combo into a control setup sort of, and then you try and push for game. So it's kind of a weirder combo deck like that, but I like it more so than this. But this is more just like set up a board where you just don't do anything. I've got negates. I've got a floodgate that's even more insane than VFD, and good luck, right? So the deck's insanely scary to play against, especially if you lose the die roll. I will say that, but that's combo decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! All right, the next thing I want to talk about is hand traps, okay? The big thing here is that with Infernobles out of the format, with Dragon Link out of the format, the combo decks definitely take a step back here. I mean, look at the things now. We do have Drytron and we do have Virtual World, but Virtual World only really gets affected by a couple of specific hand traps. Like, I guess you could say like Ash, Nib, and I guess Gamma is still pretty good versus the deck. So there's just not a ton. Lancia is decent too, but that's more of a side deck thing going on there. I don't think many people are going to be main decking Lancia. So I think hand traps take a big step back here. I think when the format, what it was before, is people wanted to main deck 10 plus hand traps because they were just so terrified of losing the die roll and just losing a set outright, because you lose die roll, you lose game 1, you win game 2, you go second game 3, and you lose again. Boom, set, match, done. And nobody wants that, right? So you got to give yourself the best chance. So people are playing so many hand traps, and I think that takes a back seat here. Virtual World, it's one of those decks that like you can kind of slow play them, especially if you're playing a more back row oriented deck. You can stall them out, like just stall out the VFD turns, like. And if you're playing a more trap oriented deck that's just not weaker to VFD, then like you don't even care much at all. You may care a little bit, but not a ton. And you could just slow play them, set some traps into their board, try and force them to like commit to the board and do something like torrential them or clear their situation. You can put yourself in a pretty good spot to take a duel, playing it slow with that deck for sure. So yeah, I think most decks are playing like Ash because it's still just so generically like hits anything in the format pretty much, and it always will. It's Ash. And then you see some people playing a secondary hand trap, whether it be Nibiru because they're fearful of Virtual World matchups. Maybe they're playing Veiler or Impermanence because they're scared of Verte Anaconda. That's another thing. Is I didn't even like save the card art here, but Dragoon seems like it has been a little bit on the rise since the new format. A lot of decks are playing like control decks, and sometimes control decks are a little lower ceiling and can struggle to out something like Dragoon. Like, I don't know, a lot of trap-based decks like can really just look at Dragoon in the face and be like, wow, that targets, that destroys. And then you kill him in 2 turns. And it's tough. So I have noticed, at least to my eye, and we'll have to wait a couple weeks to see if it really follows this trend more, but it has looked like Dragoon has been a bigger part of the format. Pretty much, so that's pretty interesting there. And then the last thing I want to talk about is trap decks. Now I put Toad here, and this could be anything. We've been kind of seeing a decent rise from trap decks. It looks like Eldritch variants are definitely on the rise, where they had kind of fallen off because they just felt way too slow. They just got outclassed by the speed and power of a lot of combo decks that they just couldn't keep up. I mean, once their opponents set up multiple negates, they were like, that's too much. And you get 2-3 of my cards, and I can't do anything. They're going to kill me on the next turn. But now nobody's really doing that. Like Virtual World, like sure, negate my Golden Lord till the end of the turn, like for this turn and next turn. Like I don't care. I'm gonna summon him out of the deck just to have him, and then I'm gonna use my trap monsters to like pop you and like disrupt you and keep you off of a ton of damage, hold you off, and then eventually try and out resource you. It can work. I'm not saying it's amazing, but it can get the job done. The format's just so much slower. Outside of Drytron, I don't think there's a single combo deck in the format that's that scary in terms of like, oh no, they're going to set up an unbeatable board, so I have to main hand traps. I have to be worried about getting things done quick and stopping them as soon as possible. Because some of these trap decks are just like, do your thing. I'll set 4 into your board. And I'll do what I can do on your turn. It's kind of crazy. So we've been seeing like a lot of these kinds of decks like coming out of the woodworks. Like I said, Eldritch. I saw there was like a second place in a 60-man tournament, like a Paleozoic Frog deck. It's pretty good. Trap Shaddolls, I know some players have been going back to and messing around with because that deck felt a little too slow before. There's a lot of stuff like that. Subterrors, Altergeist, I think might even be like respectable now because the format's slow enough for them. A lot of decks like that, these trap decks, really actually have room to breathe in this new format, and I love it. You guys know I love trap decks. You guys know I love control decks, so I'm very happy to see this development in the game. And the last thing I want to say is like people have been kind of complaining because the format seems really, really diverse. Like I think there have been some top 8s for some tournaments where it was literally 8 different decks, which is kind of crazy, but I love it. But I know a lot of competitive players kind of have that mindset of when there's top cuts like that, and like anybody could be playing any deck at any time. There's no like, I guess there are a couple decks that you think are like top decks, but even not too many players are playing those decks. It kind of makes them feel like it's so hard for me as a competitive player to like wrap my mind around the format. And that's what I want, is I want that competitive edge of like understanding the format better than other players. That way I know how to build my decks better for the format, better than other players might be building them, and have the edge that way. So I think a lot of competitive players don't like that that aspect of this format, that it doesn't seem like a super solved format with 3 to 4 decks at the top. It feels like there's a ton of decks you could see at any moment, and they could all give you trouble. So it's very hard to side deck. It's very hard to decide what tech cards to play in the main deck to handle the specific format. So you have to play like general tech cards or utility cards to that you think gives you the best chance at hitting most things across the board. But also in any given match, they could just be a huge whiff, and something that you thought hit most of everything, you play that one deck with that it does absolutely nothing against, and you could be in some big trouble. So I like that, because I think it just it's really gonna I don't know. I like it when it's harder like that. And I like it when you could face anything at any time. It makes it always interesting. It makes it much lower chances of you playing against a mirror match, which nobody really enjoys. But yeah, that's I don't know. That's pretty much it. I pretty much just want to make this video giving my overall thoughts about the format in general so far. I know we're really early into it. Maybe I'll make another video later down the line, a couple weeks, maybe a month or whatever, once we've seen a lot more tournaments conclude and a lot more just data and things rise, things drop in terms of decks and how they place in the meta, and then we can look at it again. But I don't know. I like the format. I like it a lot. I can't wait. And I can't wait for the next course. I can't wait for Blazing Vortex. I can't wait for Lightning Overdrive, actually. Lightning Overdrive is shaping up to be almost like a Phantom Rage-esque set for me, potentially, of or I want 70 out of the 100 cards in the entire set. God, I'm wild. God, I'm a freak for wanting that. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me here, guys. Thank you so much. Sorry about the rambling at the end of the video. You know how I do, though. If you want to see more discussions like this in the future, subscribe to the channel and you will get more of that. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.